Gentlemen, I am terribly sorry, and ladies, for whatever reason, my computer decided it was time to update and caused everything to crash on me at the most inappropriate time. Thank you, Windows. And I am in the process of trying to get my cameras going and everything else. I had to reboot 3 times to get it to go.
All I have is something that says,
hello? I guess everybody, probably if we need to mute everybody, and then that way I'll just continue to keep on going there. But you guys can unmute as we go from there. So I'm going to mute everybody right now, and then we'll go there from there. Again, I apologize. I'm going to try to get my video started. In the meantime, we are recording, David. It's going to the cloud. You'll be able to pull that down and go from there. Again, I apologize for the delay. One of those unavoidable things there, as you guys know. Let's go ahead and get started this morning. Glad to see everybody here. We've already got 25 online right now, and numbers probably going to be going up. Want to get started with a few announcements. NMRAX, I talked to Speed a few minutes ago. NMRAX is going to be on 11/21 starting at 10 a.m. Texas time. It will be 12 hours of 12 clinics. You guys are do need to sign in for that. If you haven't, you don't know what you're missing as far as all those different things are concerned. In the on NRAX, there's some great stuff that comes in on that. I'm having I see somebody had something in chat. There we go. Sorry, Jason, but I gotta keep going on this other stuff here for right now. Mike Corley's just texted in. He said that he had the Windows update too, but now he was panicking, but he's okay now, so that's good. We got a good situation on our clinic. Y'all apologize for my cough. It is not COVID. I promise you that. A bad time to be coughing in these day and age. But there's Mr. Corley's video. I see him came up there. Thank you, Mike. The AP program is alive and well. We need to get some people to turn in some paperwork. I know Joe Lysing was over at my layout the other day working on his electrical. So that's really good. Mr. Corley has got some paperwork he's going to be turning in, I think, here pretty quick. He's working on his author, and he's laughing at me in chat, as you can see there. And Daryl, I'm here by myself, so I'm not going to put my mask on. I'm all good. All right, buddy. Speaking of that, we're going to be having our Christmas party this year. Hopefully you read the email that I put out to everyone talking about how we will be social distancing over 6,700 square feet of massive ballroom. It's going to be a great time. So I really hope you guys decide to participate. I do know the numbers are going up. I see it every day. I think that our people are very responsible. If I didn't go there, I wouldn't have. Dwayne just said he's got Windows updates too, and that's the reason he's not here. He just texted me on the phone. So they weren't taking our meeting into consideration when they decided to push out those updates, did they? We've got that Christmas party on the lineup. I would urge you to go to Perfect Potluck if you haven't done that. Dennis Wright did a great job. Thank you, Dennis, for setting that up for us. We do appreciate that. And we've got Trapper is going to be taking care of the meats for the party. However, we are not going to be purchasing that until we can make sure that we're going to have participation from the membership. Right now, we're on the hook for about $150 worth of room reservations if we have to cancel. And that's thanks to Venus Whaley at Forest Hill, the city of Forest Hill, for working with our organization on that. I will like to ask that we get some people to volunteer to show up over there about 3:30 in the afternoon, because they have a event in the ballroom from 12 until 3:30 that day. And when they're going to be doing that, we need to flip the room and be able to have it ready for our event that's going to start where all of our people are going to start arriving about 5:30. So that's one of the things we want to do there. Mike Ross, I have a question if you can help us. Do you think that you can get one of those temperature guns from the clinic and bring it over so that we could check temperature before people are admitted to the party?
I'll see what I can do and get back to you.
Okay, please do. Thank you. And the only reason I'm asking you is because you probably got ready access to more than anybody else in our group here. So even though you're retired, okay, I get it.
I'll work on it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Let's see. Let's talk about show and tell. Who's got some show and tell items that they brought forth for the meeting? Anybody? Raise your hand. I'll look down the list here. See if anybody's got their hand up. Nobody? Cole, I want to ask you, how did your business card holder turn out? Did you ever get that finished? Just a minute. We got you muted again. Hang on a second. Let me get over to you and unmute. There you go.
No, I haven't got that finished yet. I'm still trying to find a bow to 3D print.
Okay. All right. Good luck with that. Okay.
Yeah, it's I can send you an email. There's a few others that have been posted on Thingiverse that could possibly work since we tried.
All right. Well, we'll see how it turns out for you. I'm anxious to see how that's going to work. So anyway, go ahead. Question?
I do have some stuff that I could show for show and tell that I've been working on here lately.
Okay, great. Help us out.
Let's see if I can. How can I turn my camera around? Oh, there. So I've been working on my logging layout. I finally got my modules up on the wall, and been working on trees a lot here lately. But
oh yeah, that's looking great. That's looking great.
so yeah, once I get the trees done, then I can start doing static grass and everything.
That's looking good. That's looking good. Is that any particular area that you're modeling? I like your pine trees. They're looking really good.
I'm doing a fictional logging layout set in East Texas. So I'm planning on doing, it'll be in the spring. So I want to do like all the blue bonnets, Indian paintbrushes, dogwood trees, all that kind of stuff.
Cool. Cool.
So, yep, that's it.
All right. Good deal. Anybody else? Hello? Anybody? Oh, come on, you guys. I know you got
Jason
something.
Barnum got
Jason.
something.
Yeah, Jason, talk to us. Go ahead and there you go.
All right. This has been a multi-year off and on, mostly off, but then sometimes on project. This is for our club, the Wrecking Crew over here in Birmingham. This is was a KMP models, KMP, I think it is. This is an ON30 kit for a sawmill that we did. This is all board by board construction. Well, the flaw with that thing is that it had no delivery at all for the log. So using some prints that I was able to find that was left over from a Sierra West kit. This is actually a scratch-built log jack delivery. So we got the chain and everything that would go right here. And this is in the roll deck right there. So that'll go against that. I also got a couple things. I had some, one of my trips to Houston over in Texas, as a matter of fact. I got a handful of some AHM Rivarossi cars for cheap. And then what happens when you leave one of them in the summertime?
We just lost you, Jason. You just froze up on us. Says your bandwidth is low on your network there, buddy. Corley, sunspots.
It's probably my daughter.
There you go. I got you a little bit more there. There you go.
You there?
Yes.
Okay. Well, yeah, you can see the sun damage from that being in my car over the summer.
That's not good.
So what I did is I took that and another coach, grafted them together, and now I got here a cafe coach.
Oh, nice.
That's using the roomette end off of the sleeper. This is the end off the coach, and then that's a service door cut in right there. This side needs to still have the windows changed right there in the middle, but that's in progress. So basically took this one, did some slicing and dicing, put it onto that.
Well done. Looks good. I'm anxious to see how that's going to turn out, Jason. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
We've got a new guest with us today. I want to welcome Rich Mossholder from Santa Rosa, California. Hi, Rich. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We're welcome. Rich is working on his MMR, and you're modeling that in HON3. Is that right, Mossy?
Yeah, that's HON3. Just working at it. It's going to take a while, I think.
Now, I know for a fact you have some things there that you could show us that you've been working on. You want to share some things with the group here? I know some bridge piers. You've got some things that you're doing to change a locomotive around from standard gauge to narrow gauge, and you've got some buildings that you've just got through completing.
Yeah, I can go get it. It'll take me a couple minutes to bring it all down here. I'm in the office and that stuff's upstairs. So
okay.
Hang on.
All right.
I'll be back.
All right. Thanks. Let's see here. Trying to find out if Dwayne still hasn't made it over. I was going to let him talk about AP and tips and tricks. Anybody got any tips and tricks on things that they're working on that you've been able to pick up? Man, you guys are quiet on us today. Tom, go ahead. Unmute you there. Unmute there, Tom. Hit your space bar. Yeah, you're still muted there, Tom. There
Now
you
I'm
go.
not.
There you go.
So anyway, I'd like to talk about the lowly NMRA gauge, which I'm sure most of you use every now and then. But one of the things that I've encountered is that most people don't know is that the two little knobs up on the top of the gauge. Let me see if I can share it with you here. Only the host. I don't want to share the meeting. I just want.
Oh, wait a minute. That's it. I apologize. Hang on a second. Let me fix that for you.
Well, anyway, it's not a big deal. Let's just.
There you go. You can share now. You can share now.
Okay, hold on. Whoops. Photos. Privacy. I don't care about that. Access. And this one. How's that?
We can't see. Well, there you are. Yeah, sure can now.
Okay. So up at the top of the NMRA gauge are 2 points that talk about flangeways. And it's been my experience that a lot of people have problems with derailing on turnouts because the wheels will pick the point. And after you've re-gauged the wheels, it may still happen. but the little flangeway thing is designed to use between that little guardrail and the point. And if you drag that along upside down through the points, you'll find out that in many times that little guardrail thing is located too close to the points, allowing the wheels to pick. And the solution is to glue, in my case, for HO anyway, a small strip of styrene on the inside of that guardrail. And you'll find that if you have old first generation Atlas switches, or even if you have some of the Payco switches, especially the 3-way, and you glue some strip styrene along that edge on the flangeway, that all of a sudden you can run trains through the diverging route on a turnout with no problems. So.
Now, Tom, on my gauge that I'm looking at here and holding, I've got 3 tabs across the top. Are you familiar with one that's got 3 of those things at the top?
Oh, that boy, not right off the top of my head. Maybe that's for HO and 3 or something.
No, it says standard gauge HO scale, but it's
I just
instead
used
of
the 2 outside ones.
Yeah, right. I just wondered if there was a use for the center tab. That was the reason for I had my question that you were aware of.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'd have to go back and read the directions again.
Yeah, now
I believe the center one is for your frog.
Oh, is that what it's for?
That could very
Okay,
well
to tell
be.
where the frog point's supposed to be. Okay,
Could
cool.
very well be.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes sense. That does make sense.
But anyway, I apologize for not having another picture that shows
No,
the
that's
styrene in place. But anyway,
yeah, no,
that's it for today.
that's a good tip. That's a good tip. David, did you have something you wanted to share? David Hager? Oh, were you through, Tom? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Okay.
I'm cool.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Yep.
Bye.
You can unshare if you would.
Yeah, Mike.
Mike, it's possible you might have one of the rare San Francisco cable car gauges.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that may be it too. Yeah. David, go ahead.
If you have a resin printer and you need to buy a replacement screen for your vat, you can get them on Amazon. They have a protective film on them. I don't know if you can see it.
Yep.
This one's peeling off. I peeled this one off. You need to remove that before you try to print something.
Ask you how you know that? Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm showing you how I know that. You will get failed prints. And then it bubbles on you when you try to take your object off of the, if you have a little bit of resin stick to the film, it's going to peel off. And I thought I ruined 2 of them and threw them away.
Oh, no.
Anyway.
All right. Let's see. Rich, you're back.
I'm back. Hang on, let me unmute here. There we go. So I've been experimenting a lot with narrowing down standard gauge locomotive chassis to make function for HON3. And as part of my MMR projects, one of the ones that I've recently did was it's an Athearn Blue Box locomotive, and it was a I want to say an S2 or a small switching locomotive. And here's the chassis here, and it's been narrowed, and I put the wipers on the wheels, and they narrow down pretty easily, and they run like a blue box. But the nice thing about it is in HON3, these have a significant amount of weight, so you can actually drag your stuff around the layout. This particular chassis is for a White Pass and Yukon shovel nose shell that I have. And the story behind these is Cliff Grant back in the 1970s decided he was going to get into the HON3 brass train market. and he had 50 of these shells made. And not long after he had these delivered to him, Precision Scale put out the same model. And so he took the boxes and shoved them in a closet and said, screw it. About a year and a half ago, David Grant was in the process of going through all of his stuff and moving things along, and he came across this in the closet. He wanted to sell these before he sold Grant Line off. And so I ended up with 4 of them, and there was no chassis and no mechanism for it. So I started looking around, and about 3 weeks ago, I was going through a junk box and I found the S2 chassis. And I said, that looks about the right size. And the only thing I had to do to modify this to fit on the shell was a little notch right here to clear the ladders. So I'll put this on and you can see how it fits. But there it is. And
that would actually be for ON3.
This is HON3.
That's very well done. Good job. Good job.
Thanks. So that's one project. I've got a whole bunch of them in the works. I purchased a Athearn Hustler online that had been converted to HON3, and in the process of stripping the shell, I screwed it up. Anyway, so here's the chassis for that one, which has been narrowed, and it's all geared, and it runs fairly well, but there's some gear issues with it because they use the wrong type of gears. I started modifying the shell that I screwed up just for fun, and this is it so far.
Has your new one showed up yet?
No, not yet. But what's really going to be fun about this, you can see the fan is see-through, and what I've done is I've made this fan right here, which is actually going to function off of one of the decoder functions, one of the lighting decoder functions. So I'll have a fan that actually works in the shell. And then for the radiator portion of it, which is
Mike
also
Ross, would you get that temperature gauge and check his temperature real quick? Because I'm thinking he's got a fever. Okay.
Nah.
Yeah, we're all worried about him there.
I'm not worried about it. I got a doctor in the house, so it's okay. The radiator grill on the Hustler is also see-through, and what I've found is if I take a piece of corrugated aluminum, like you use for roofing, I laminate that to like an 050 or a pretty thin sheet of styrene. I can set it behind the grill, and now it looks like the radiator's in there.
That's awesome.
It's kind of a neat little detail trick that you guys can use, and it helps out. It adds a lot to the realism. So hope that little thing gives you something.
Before you start showing some of your structures there, Mossy, I want to apologize. Pardon me, to everyone that was sitting in the waiting room waiting for me to admit them. I apologize. In all of the fervor of rebooting and trying to get the meeting started and everything else, I had failed to disable the waiting room, and I really apologize for that, because there was like 10 people sitting there waiting to try to get into the meeting. So please accept my apologies. All right, Mossy, back to you. Keep going. You're doing a great job. Thanks.
Okie dokie. So I'm going to show one structure, and I'll give the story behind it, and that's that Venado post office, Mackie.
Yeah, I was hoping you would.
So this is the Venado post office, and it is pretty tiny little building. The lot of detail. Every shingle I handmade, and there are 650 or something like that on there. I did a full interior and all of that. The lights work.
And that's accurate in HO scale, correct?
Yes, it is measured.
Even the
And-
shingles are accurate size. I mean, they're not oversized for that building.
My shingles are actually undersized a little bit. They should be a little bit bigger,
Wow.
but I didn't really get the opportunity to measure them like I wanted to.
Why
And
is that?
That
Why
goes
is
to
that,
the
Mossy?
story. We have, over the past couple of years, had a number of fires locally, as I'm sure you've heard about. And this year, I started working towards my MMR, and this particular structure was one that I wanted to do. And I had made measurements of it and photographs and all that, and it was on another computer, and that computer crashed. I had made a couple of rudimentary drawings of it, and I had the footprint on cut out of a piece of paper, and I was using that as a template. Well, when I went back to, I started building this, and then I went back I was going to go back and take some pictures. 2 days after I started the construction of this, the building burned down. So there was nothing left of it. And I had to go off of the couple of photographs that I had and basically the footprint of the model, reverse engineer everything and take measurements from the footprint and off the photographs to kind of scale everything appropriately. Bit of a challenging job. The structure was built in, I want to say 1920 something. So it's almost 100 years old, or it was. And it had been somebody's shed for a long time, sitting up in the redwoods. And anyway, it was a fun build.
What did they use for a foundation on that building?
Oh, here, I can show you what they used because the building's removable. They used redwood stumps and logs for the foundation, and that's what I used on the structure here. So.
And that's real redwood that you used and cut to make the stumps. Is that right?
No.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood.
No, I used wild grapevine for that we have here, that we can source here locally.
Yep.
It gives you a really good bark texture, which is the same as what I used for the tree itself. That's grapevine, wild grapevine. Yeah, actual real redwood doesn't really work for it because the bark texture is a little too thick. So with the grapevine, you actually get the rings and you get the heartwood, you get the sapwood, and you get that bark structure that you're looking for. So that's why I use that. I submitted this for my MMR I got my first merit award with this one. And I told myself that if it didn't merit, I was going to burn it and submit the ashes as prototypical. So it did just fine, and I'm pretty happy with it. It turned out nice. So that's about all I got for today. I'll let you guys. I'll stop boring you guys and let you go on with what you need to do.
No, it's not boring at all. You do great work, and I'm certainly glad. I wanted you guys to get to know Mossy, and I've been watching some of his work from a distance for a while, and so I invited him yesterday if he'd like to join our meeting, and he's going to be I hope he continues to come if we don't run him off by the way that the meeting didn't start on time and everything today this morning, but he'll be a great addition to our little group here because he does some great work and he's got some great tips and techniques. He is an amazing source for finding that unusual part or putting some things together. So if you've got some questions, and by the way, and I'm going to give you a shameless plug here, Mossy. Rich used to own a hobby shop, and he was telling us the other day that the quickest way to make $1 million in the hobby shop business is to start with 2 million and then close your company after it's lost $1 million. So that's the way that he ended up there. he might have something you're looking for. I tell you what, Mossy, in the chat area, put in your email address in the chat area in case somebody wants to get in touch with you, because he's got HO scale stuff. He's got N scale stuff. I don't know. Don't you have some G gauge and things like that? No?
ON 30.
Okay. ON 30. Okay. ON 30. Okay. All right. So, but Reggie, you and Dennis, and by the way, glad you could join us, Reggie. I'm glad nobody broke anything on the BNSF today. So glad you're here. For those of you who don't know, Reggie works in the IT department at BNSF. So he's about 4 miles from my house here. I think you're in between my house and headquarters or something like that. If you're over in Saginaw, Is that right, Reggie?
Yep. And I was how I came about this was I joined the forum and Leo talked me into it. Leo was just 2 blocks from me.
Is that right? Is that you live over in that area?
Yeah,
Well,
I live like almost around the corner, and for like 5 years I drove by his house, didn't know it. And he
oh,
told me,
wow.
dude, I'm right up the street. So
yeah. And by the way, for those of you who need to know, Lori is doing well. She and I've had some opportunity to have some communication text wise. However, she's got another circumstance that she's going through right now. Leo's mother is in hospice, and so she's having to deal with that now. And bless her heart, I mean, it's just too much. That's just too much of a burden for any one person to have to go through after what she had to endure until Leo passed away in July. So that's just horrible. So send your prayers up for Lori, if you would. She needs to be uplifted right now, if you would. And Mossy has put his email address in to get over there, and if you want to get in touch with him. I was hoping that scheduling was going to allow for another one of the guys that's on our meeting from time to time, Bruce Petrarca. He comes in and joins us from Phoenix. Bruce is arriving on Monday afternoon. He is coming in to stay with me for a week, and we're going to be going around doing some layout tours and things. He's going to be working with us on the 2023 convention. And I know that Mr. Packer, Mr. Ross, several of you here on the call have already graciously opened up your layouts for us to come by and take a look at. So I certainly want to acknowledge that generosity to the group that you guys are doing and going from there. Dwayne, you have anything you want to share real quick on the AP program?
Just that people aren't writing up their paperwork. Needs to happen.
Okay. I mentioned that before you joined the call, but Corley said he's just to get on his this week and get that stuff turned in. And so is Daryl Cowles. They both have said that they're going to jump right in on that. So.
I hope so. Very deserving, both of them, and probably have more than they already know.
Well, and believe it or not, Lysing is he's taking a look at I think he's about to finish his electrical. So.
No, it looks like he's about to finish a cigarette, but that's okay.
Well, that too. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and he starts to cough when you said that.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I see Mr. Greco's on. We're gonna be trying to get his prototype judged here shortly.
Yes, Tom, and I apologize for not getting back to you as promptly as I should have on that.
So
but we'll get you a Zoom call set up, and we'll be able to try to get that taken care of for you. I'll make sure that happens.
Okay. Yeah. Whenever you get a chance, no hurry.
Okay. Dave, good to see you down there. I apologize that we hadn't been getting you the D1 meeting information, but I'm glad you're able to link in with us today. Dave Griffith. So good to see you there, buddy. Let's see here. And one other thing, tipping back to the Christmas party, anybody that's here from Division 5, you are welcome to make the drive over. It's going to be on a Saturday. It's going to be in the evening. So you guys are certainly welcome to come on over, and we'd love to have you to join us for that particular gathering. We are going to have, and I'm refraining from using the term that we typically use, but we're going to have and this time I'm going to call it our wild gift exchange rather than what we normally call it, because I don't think we want to acknowledge anything coming from that country, especially after COVID. So there you have it. Hey, Jim, good to see you there. I'm glad you're here, buddy. You're muted, so we can't hear you, but well, I saw you say something as an acknowledgement. There you go. Let's see. For those of you who weren't in the meeting, let me reiterate one more time that Speed has said that the NMRA-X will be live online on 11/21, starting at 10 a.m. Texas time for 12 hours and 12 one-hour clinics. So go ahead and mark that on your calendar and take care of that. In the newsletter that we received, hopefully you received your newsletter from the division, and I want to thank Mr. Galvin for a good job on the newsletter, as he always does, and I want to acknowledge Mr. Hager for helping out with that as he's stepped in on that particular job. Thank you, David, for that. But in the newsletter article, I mentioned that we are holding elections right now. The region is going to be having a president, treasurer, and we are eligible, since we're in Division 1, to vote for Division 1 director. Yours truly is running again, but if anybody else would like to throw their hat in the ring, you're certainly welcome to do so. And I want to encourage everyone to participate in the election. There was a particular division that I'm not going to call out a number, but one particular division where the director, there were 3 votes cast, and if the director that was the incumbent hadn't voted for himself, he wouldn't have been reelected. So just to give you a heads up, participate in the election, put your votes in, no matter where you are. We want you to participate in the election, even though we just got through all of that stuff that in November 3rd. So one more time, but the election is not until February, but the candidates can put their name in currently until December 1st. So you can do that. Anybody else have anything they want to add? We went through a couple of tips and tricks before Dwayne got on. Dwayne's always got a couple that he throws in there, but if anybody wants to, I'm going to slide down the page here and see if anybody's got their hand up over in the chat room. Anybody else before we move on? Dwayne, you got something you want to throw in there? Unmute. You can't unmute. Let me see if I can unmute you from over here then. Nope. Sorry, buddy.
You can press the space bar.
Yeah, press your space bar, Dwayne. Now he's frozen. That, or he's just doing a really good pantomime. He's one of those guys out on the streets right now. So, all right.
While you're waiting on Dwayne,
yeah, Jeff. Yeah, Jeff. Yeah.
In the October NMRA turntable, there was an article called "Starting Your First Wood Structure." I do not recommend that video for any reason. It is one of the poorest examples of how to build a building that I've seen in recent times. And what really stresses me even more, it's NMRA sponsored. So my rant on it is far less than Dwayne's rant. So if we can ever get him unmuted, he can go on for days. But they do stupid things in the video that are totally incorrect, such as putting your sidewalls on the outside of your peak walls, as a for instance, or how about spreading the glue around with your finger, which is a disaster waiting to happen because you're going to touch something else, and before you get it wiped off. I mean, it just it just goes on and on and on. But anyway, I've been told
Jeff, tell us about your upcoming.
Not well.
Jeff, tell us about your upcoming articles in Model Railroad Hobbyist. You've submitted 3 or 4, haven't you?
No, I've got about 12.
Oh, okay. Darn. I underestimated your prolific authorship. Tell us what you got coming up.
Well, last month I did an article on the Wonder Cutter, and the folks from Micromark seems to be fairly happy with that one.
I bet they are.
Next month, in December, there's one on automation. If the sander that Dwayne likes to talk about that he uses a lot, as far as that goes, I do too, is a thing called automation. It's sander, and it's a great tool for squaring up lumber, for putting angles on various lumber. How it came about, because then talking to Al Collins, and for those who don't know who Al Collins is, the original starter of Mount Albert's lumber was Al Collins, who sold it and so forth and so on. So now he's doing other things, but he is, like I said, it's a great instrument. For those who want to complain about price, either the Wonder Cutter and or the Automation Sander, both are a little pricey for a lot of people. But to me, if you get a good tool, it's a good tool. Other things coming up, I've got you'll see over the next year articles on how to build your own miter saw electrically, and that will that article that couple of articles will be out next year. I did a series of articles on rebuilding a Climax. If anybody remembers the hideously gross Climax that Roundhouse put out, I show you how to rebuild it and make it look halfway decent. Then articles on AK pencils, which if you haven't had the privilege of using those, you need to look at it because it's a great way of adding detail. The AK pencils are actually a watercolor pencil, but what you can do with it for blending and so forth, it allows you to do some really fine detail on rust lines and streak lines and other things of that nature too. I mean, you can use them to paint a whole whatever you want to do. I mean, it is a watercolor, but to me, it's best when you use it for detail. Other article on 55K static grass machine will come out, and it has it, like I said, there's about I haven't got even Mike's turntable that he has on his layout. That's an article in there also. So like I said, there's about 12 articles over the next. Probably it takes more than a year because they're going to space them out a little bit. Otherwise, I'd have to have an article or two every month. And talking to Joe Fugate, he wants to spread them out a little bit more than that. And there's some more articles that I'm working on right now that should be of interest. I'm doing an article on some of the Blair line kits. Already doing an article on, like I said, Dwayne and I are currently working on a presentation on wooden structure construction, and I'll end up turning that somehow into an article also. But like I said, there are pitfalls, and people always are complaining about things like, do I paint one side or both sides? Well, I can tell you guys, the odds are are much more in favor of you painting both sides if you want success. To keep keep a piece of lumber basically flat. And if you're still a flocal user, hold on to that stuff and use it as long as you can, because talk about no warpage. The only other thing that you got out there that you can use that works really well for not warping so far is True Scale. But then again, it's an acetone base, so you have to be careful with it. But anything that's water-based is going to warp. I don't care what it is. And and if you have not figured out how to spray using acrylics so that you don't turn your flat into semi-gloss or gloss, that's also a series of that's an article that's going to be coming out probably really late next year. But acrylics is giving us a whole new set of rules and ways of doing things, because they don't work like our old paints. Nowhere near.
All right. Well, thanks, Jeff. We appreciate it. We'll be looking forward to those.
Okay.
So I'm gonna do a little impromptu with Mr. Ogden here real quick. Yeah, he jerked his head up whenever I said that real quick. I saw that. You nearly snapped your neck there, Jim. So guys, it was a couple of weeks ago, and I was digging through some stuff. You know where I'm going with this, Jim, on the thing we texted back and forth about on those little containers. So I found something in my junk box that I did not have any clue what it was. And in fact, let me see if I can bring up this other camera over here. Hang on a second. See if I can switch this over. Nope, can't. So this is this little piece right here. And it's labeled for the Missouri Pacific Railroad. But this is a little container. It looks like little hoppers. Okay. And there were two of them. I have two of them. Okay. And so I reached out to Jim, because I asked Jim, I said, Jim, you're probably the premier guy for Missouri Pacific around here. Tell me what these are for. And so, Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you go from there. What do you tell us about this?
Let me make sure that I'm unmuted here. A lot of cases, these things are carrying commodities like dolomite or cement, and it allowed them to get around not having to purchase a designated cement hopper. And I've actually pulled a book that I have, which is by Charles Duckworth, which actually shows some of the cars on the Missouri, Illinois. And of course, they had a lot of dolomite and cement and sand. And in the 1930s, railroads did not want to buy a car that was only going to be for one shipper. And by getting these little containers like that, they could actually get a crane and lower these little containers into a gondola, and deliver that to the shipper or deliver that to whoever's receiving it. And then when they were through using the gondola car as kind of a stand-in for a cement hopper, they'd just get a crane and lift the things out. And then you actually had, but the containers could actually be lifted out of the car.
And if you look at this, you can see that right now I've lifted it by the hook in the middle here, and I'm just holding it with a dental pick. And you can see how it would have been lifted out with a crane hook, exactly like Jim's talking about.
Now, the ones I'm familiar with, each one of those was lifted separately, but again, I'm not going to, I don't know of any that are out there today. There may be something behind some sort of a building in Mount Vernon, Illinois, or something like that, but it's just a way of the railroads of the 30s and 40s getting more use out of a freight car. And I had these two. I didn't know what they were, and you certainly shed the light on that, and for that we appreciate it. And if you guys have something else that's a rarity that you're not sure exactly how it fits on your railroad or whatever, bring it to the meeting. I'm sure we can probably come up with it.
Anybody else have anything before we turn this over to Mr. Corley and get him started on our clinic? I want to open the floor up for anything. Q&A. How about anybody got any questions on stuff you're working on that you need some help on? Anybody at all? Yeah, Reggie.
Yeah, so I was Dwayne's been very helpful on helping me. I want to get some certifications in a few items. I found out that my mom threw away all my old pictures from my first layout when I was a kid on some homemade structures. So I'm pretty much going to start over. So when you do a certification, do you have to do it on the entire layout as an entirety, or can you do specific sections? Because my layout is evolving, and I looked at it based on what Dwayne's gave me feedback on, and there's some sections I would like to enhance with some better homemade buildings that I'm going to start building on my own. So certifications, is it the entire layout or just parts? Can you,
Just the
how does
parts
that work?
Yeah, just the parts you want to work on. I'm finally back.
Okay.
Yeah, you can work on it in pieces. You can work on the layout as an entirety, however you want to do it. You can have stuff that, if, like, say you're a member of the Texas Western, for example, if there's a piece of that they can certify that you did all the work, then for track work or structures or scenery or whatever, you can claim that as well. Like if you're doing civil, for example, you've got to hand lay 3 pieces of track. If your layout's already done, you don't need any more track. So if none of it was done on the layout, then what are you going to do? So at that point, you can build it on a separate piece of homosote and just, if you're going to make a turnout, for example, make enough room on all the legs of that turnout for a locomotive to run through it in each direction so that we can observe that and then run our gauges through it and all of that. And it can be on a separate piece. It doesn't even have to be on the layout. So there's a lot of options there. And the idea is to try to make it flexible enough that you can get it done.
Okay. And in fact, Reggie, Jeff Palmer, when he was working on his MMR before he got it, he actually did scenery work on my layout, and we were able to judge it on my layout, and he was able to count it towards the scenery that he did. So it's a perfect example.
And we were talking about Tom Greco has got his prototype modeler ready to go again. That's a smaller module that he's got built out right now that hopefully will be incorporated into his soon to be built railroad.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because I have 2 buildings that I put on my layout just for sentimental value that if you judge the entire layout, I was like, I can't have that on there now.
Well, a great place to start is Golden Spike. It's for lack of a better term, it's kind of the gateway drug into the achievement program. Okay. And for that, you're not being judged on, your normal AP type stuff where we're going to get. In fact,
Reggie, I've seen pictures of your layout, and you've already got Golden Spike. If you'll just set up a time for Dwayne and I, or even me, to look at, do a little Zoom call or whatever, and I can sign off on your Golden Spike. I did it for Dennis Wright, didn't I, Dennis? We got your Golden Spike done that way exactly.
Okay, that's cool, because I have a 10-year-old. He's like my buddy, and he'll look at my layout and he goes, "Well, that's a joke right there. You want to remove that." Like, so that makes me apprehensive. I was like, "Oh man."
Living with a house full of critics.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dwayne. I'm sorry.
Yeah, never come to the kids expecting a little affirmation. Boy, they'll tell you right exactly what's wrong with it every time. But yeah, it's something to really consider. I mean, you can build it. We can look it right there on your desktop or whatever. I mean, just work on what you want to work on, and at some point, give me a call and let's talk about what you've gotten done and kind of what your plan is going forward. Because one of the things that a lot of people will make a mistake on is it's not just 7 out of the 11 to get an MMR. There's 4 categories involved there, and you've got to have 1 out of each of the 4. And you'll be surprised how many MMRs didn't get theirs until number 8, because they didn't realize it and had all of this one and all of that one and none of one of the others, and ended up having to go back and do it. And I'll throw my dad under the bus. He was one of them. He got down there and then realized what was going on, and he had to drop back and build cars and finished it off, but it was his 8th certificate. So It happens. It really does. And it's one of those things where I try to sit down with guys who are getting involved with this and kind of help them come up with a plan to get them to the finish line there. So yeah, give me a buzz sometime and let's talk about it.
I definitely will. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
And that goes for anybody else too. I mean, you've heard me say it month in and month out. Really ought to get involved because it will make you a better modeler, and it is a really great program. It will really stretch your skill set, and you'll learn a lot when you get into this. So, like I say, anybody's interested, give me a call.
I want to get a testimony from Mossy. Mossy, you and I were having a conversation yesterday or the day before, I can't remember which, and you reiterated exactly what Dwayne's talking about right now. You want to share that?
Yeah, it's made me a completely better modeler for sure. I was an okay modeler before I started the AP program, and what it's forced me to do is, as I'm building things, I look at it and I go, before it was, okay, that's good enough. That'll move along. And now I look at it and I go, that's not good enough. It's not good enough until it's right. And
good enough isn't. That's what you learned working on
isn't.
that. Good enough isn't. Yeah.
And the thing that I found most interesting about it is you may end up doing that same thing 2 or 3 times, but on the second or third time, you've got it right. And you've built another skill set that you can use elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. He nailed it right there. I mean, when you realize that good enough isn't, you've taken, to quote Star Wars, you've taken that first step into a larger world. It really will make a big difference in what you do and how your layout works.
Mr. Ross, how far are you away from getting your MMR?
I think I'm waiting for our gondola project.
You mean at Flat Car Clinic?
Flat car.
And let's talk about that for a second, guys. Right now, as it stands, we are going to try to start our face-to-face meetings again in January. But with the numbers coming up, Dave, that's a great view of your feet right there. I love that. That is amazing. Dave Griffith, super. I think he's on the phone. He's not even paying attention to us right now. So anyway, that third toenail needs a little clipping there, but other than that, we're in great shape. All right. So no, the plan is for us to try to resume and start that clinic in January. But I'm just being very cautious here, guys, and we may come down to the wire and have to push it off. I mean, I don't want to risk the health of everybody for something that is not essential. It's important to us, yes, because it's our hobby, but it's not essential, if you will, for life sustaining whatever, you know what I'm getting at. So if we have to push it off, we may do that. And Joe Lysing and Dennis and I have been working together to possibly come up with other clinics that we can drop in on a moment's notice. And we've got people on standby. And if we have to push it off, we're just going to have to push it off. So, Mike, I apologize that we're holding you up, but I will tell you, okay, as an alternative, there are plans on the LSR website that if you want to go ahead and pursue this, I mean, as an example, there was no clinic when I scratch built my cars, okay? And so if you want to go ahead and start down that path, the instructions, the plans, and everything are on the LSR website. Dwayne, could you put in the chat the link to that that clinic that's in there on the LSR so that they can just click on it and go straight to it? If you can.
I'll have to look and see if it's back out there. It wasn't last I looked, so but it's been a while since I've been on the site. So
okay, all right. Well, if you would double check that.
Yeah, yes, sir. It's partly inertia and partly looking at 2023 as the deadline. And
oh, okay. Well, yeah. We want to get you there before that. That's for sure. Okay. Anybody else have anything? Yes, David. We can't hear you. You're unmuting. You're not muted. You are muted. Excuse me.
I thought I clicked it.
There.
I'm sorry about that. This came yesterday. It looks pretty straightforward, but if there's any first time use advice, I'd appreciate it.
The thing you got to watch on that chopper is that it is not a guillotine chopper. And a guillotine is going to come straight down. That one's going to come at an angle and chop your wood. A guillotine chopper will come straight down. So understand that when you make your cut, it's going to give you it's going to shift on you just a little bit if you're not very, very careful with it. Dwayne, I know you talk about that in some of your other clients. You're jacked up again. Palmer, would you step in and add your 2 cents on that?
I didn't see the chopper, so
It's just a regular chopper from
okay,
Northwest
yeah,
Short Line.
the razor blades are thin. Okay, just remember that. Therefore, for cutting, small stuff, 2x2s, maybe up even 4x4s, you're probably okay. But when you start getting up to 6x6s and 8s and stuff like that, you start experiencing something called blade deflection. And that's because even though you're coming straight down on the wood is fighting back or resisting, so to speak, and it's causing the blade to come out. So basically what you end up having to do, like if you're building a bridge or say a coaling tower or something like that, where you have some fairly decent sized pieces of lumber, you have to go in and sand where you cut flat. So just beware.
Also, if I may, David, constantly check the tightness of the screws on the blade. They will sometimes loosen up, which makes your blade stray off to one side or another. So if you make sure that they stay tight, you're going to get better cuts.
Okay, thanks, guys.
You are more than welcome. And Jeff, is your cutter article been published? Did you say it was or not?
It will be published. It has not been published.
Okay, that's what I meant. I was gonna tell him to go back and look at his MRH in history if it had already been published, but obviously I can't do that. So
no.
And if you don't subscribe to Model Railroad Hobbyist, it's free. Just do a Google search on Model Railroad Hobbyist electronic magazine, and it's a pretty good thing. I also urge you to talk or possibly even subscribe or go by a hobby shop and get a copy of Cowcatcher magazine because that's a very, very good little magazine, and it's published locally, and the publisher is a member of our division. So reach out and support him there. Let's see. Dwayne, I see you're back now. I don't know
until
if
Windows locks up on me again.
Yeah, and everybody's facing all kinds of crazy stuff today with these updates. Did you have anything you wanted to add to David about that cutter?
I don't know what all was covered, so I'm not sure.
Blade deflection, and keeping the screws tight were the two main things that came out.
Yeah, very much so. They're handy machine. They're handy little units. Do not get me wrong. They are. I use mine constantly. I mean, I've got one of the smaller ones. I've got one of the longer ones that has, and I've mounted a second arm on mine, and then I've got the motorized one that Jeff built for me. And all of them get a lot of heavy use. When you're chopping things that are 2x4 and smaller, it'll cut just fine. It's when you start getting into the bigger pieces where you'll start getting that blade deflection. So it's something it's very usable. You ask anybody that's been in the hobby for any length of time that does any scratch building at all, and they've got one. It's not that it's a bad unit. It's just it has its own deficiencies that you have to work around. So I think the guys pretty much touched it. That sander that Jeff was talking about before I froze up a second time, those things are wonderful. They are a little pricey, but if you plan on building a lot of things from scratch, It's definitely worth the money to invest in one because you can take that blade deflection and sand it right back off again. So, and it doesn't take but a couple of seconds to do it. So we'll, when we finally get around to doing the clinics, I'll be bringing mine over and show y'all how it works. And we'll get a chance to get your hands on one, because when I first saw the idea, I kind of thought it was a solution in desperate search of a problem. But once I got my hands on one at the narrow gauge convention last fall, I was like, nope, that's it. I need to buy one. So then turned around and grabbed Palmer, and then he saw it. He's like, yep, I'm gonna have to get one of these. So they end up selling a couple just because we could get our hands on them and see what they could really do for us. So
there's also, speaking of things that you might have seen or whatever, and I know that Jeff made a buy on one of these the other day, is a static grass applicator out of Germany. It's called a Grasskeeper or Greenskeeper, excuse me. Isn't that right, Jeff?
Yeah.
Greenskeeper.
I believe
A
so.
little pricey, but they are the Mac Daddy of all static grass applicators. What's the wattage on those, Jeff? Or I guess that's the right term to.
It should be.
There you are. Okay, here we go. Take a look at this. 55 kV, and it's from RTS Greenskeeper. And I think our friend Pat McCarthy over in Mississippi bought the first one in the United States. Jeff bought number 2, I think, in the United States. A friend of ours out in California that some of you have, he's done clinics for D3. Pete Steinmetz is getting ready to buy another one. Again, they're not cheap, but boy, whenever they work, they are on their game. It's pretty amazing. And they do, I will tell you this, do not try to use Woodland Scenic's grass, static grass for that. Their static grass does not have a high enough polyester content in it to accept a charge. Now this machine will stand them up, but if you're using anything less than this Greenskeeper, their composite on their static grass will not take a good enough charge there. So
over the last 10 years, only 2 Masters champions that have gone on to win. The Green Jacket has.
We'll go ahead and turn off Mr. Brannon's microphone. I think he was probably watching the Masters while he was participating in this. I know Dick. This is a holy weekend for Dick for the Masters going on right now. So there we go. All right, Mr. Corley. Are you up and ready to move forward with us? Hello, Mike. Let's go ahead and get you unmuted there, Mr. Corley. Where are you?
I'm here.
There you are. Good. All right. And you want to go ahead and share your screen or whatever you're going to be doing. Guys, if you've never participated in one of Mr. Corley's clinics, you're in for a great treat because he does a fantastic clinic. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mr. Corley.
Hi, I'm going to have to learn how to navigate between my face and the screen. I don't know what, are you just seeing me now?
Nope, we're seeing your PowerPoint presenter's notes.
Oh, crud. So that's why I was wondering what all you're going to see. So
now we're seeing the PowerPoint setup. A minute ago, we saw the regular slide.
Okay. I don't have to have my presenter's notes. I'll just speak off the cuff, but
you should have a window. There you go, right there. That's what you want to do. And now
okay, that's fine.
Now
I love the presenter's notes when I can put the focus on that, because then I know what slide's coming up next. You know, I've slept since I prepared this and probably forgot.
Well, yeah, you should have it. You only got one monitor, I bet, don't you?
Yeah, no problem.
Can you minimize this screen a little bit and have both windows open on the same time, but only share one of
No,
the?
when I put this on the sharing mode, it takes over my entire screen, but it's no problem. I can go on from here.
Well, there's a setting at the top of Zoom that's full screen or not. And I think you've probably got it in full screen mode, and that's what's causing you to have that problem.
Okay, well, I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's fine.
I can't practice on Zoom ahead of time.
Yep.
Because I, don't have a meeting to go to, but anyway. Okay, no problem. Folks, this is making structures look real. It's probably going to be received differently by different people. There are a lot of people that are in our group and online that know much more about structures than me. And I'm hoping they will add their knowledge to this. This is kind of a generic one. It's really the second time I've done a Zoom meeting, and it's really not much fun because there's no feedback from the audience, and you can't practice hands-on while we're doing it. Normally this would be accompanied by a hands-on on each one of the topics. So anyway, with that caveat, let's go ahead and get started. The objective of the clinic is to introduce you and review different techniques for making structures look more realistic. And we're going to do that by focusing on photographs, pigments, paint colors, and details. So the agenda for today is going to be pictures, paint, roofing, windows, interiors, lighting, and signs. Many of you will recognize this model from South River Model Works. It's probably one of my favorite kits that he's ever come out with. I didn't get a chance to build it because I sold it to Leo Politti, and I don't know if he built it or not, but it's a beautiful kit. It's more applicable to this area than some of the ones from South River Model Works that are more oriented to the Northeast. But there's a lot going on this, and it looks pretty realistic. And we're going to talk about some of those things now. First of all, I'd like to say that the main thing that you need when you start, if you're modeling a structure, is to get a photograph of it. I can't imagine building this structure without a photograph of the original. It's, so much more about eras, paint, what it looked like, interiors, lighting, everything. So I really think it's important to have a picture. If you don't have a picture of exactly that building you're going to build, get one from the same era or region. And pictures, start with prototype pictures before you begin building, or when you take a building and want to modify it, get a picture. Look at the region. Structures built for the Northeast don't always look appropriate in Texas, for instance. So it's real important to do that. It's also important to look at the era, because different materials were used and different styles were used. If you look at this picture here, you can see a lot of what's going on. These structures all had little small wooden shingles. There's a fence. I don't know if that's to keep kids in or chickens in. It could be one of those. If you look around, you'll see lots of debris on the ground besides grass and trees and things like that. I love this one over here because you can see there's either weeds growing up or just trash that's underneath it. Most of the decks that I've done have been empty underneath, but this picture gave me a good idea for those things to modify that to make it look more realistic. You'll notice all kinds of little trash sitting around on this one. This is if you're building something really old or building a logging layout. You can also see that they've used some big slats of wood for the porches on many of these structures, and they have a little bit of rolled roofing going on up here, it looks like, or tar paper. So you can see a lot from a photograph that will guide you in what you're doing.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
Can you back up that picture just a second?
You bet.
You're talking about some of the unusual details that you see in a picture like this. Look at the right there where you've got it. Notice right underneath the stove jack of both of these two cabins here in the foreground, there's what looks like 2 vertical boards and maybe another horizontal board, and it's on both of them.
Hmm.
And it's not over a door, so that's not some sort of gutter. I'm wondering what that's for.
I think
That's
it's
Interesting detail.
It's to let people be up and be able to work on the smoke jack and stay on the roof.
Might be.
A
Might be.
foothold kind of thing. Because you'll
I
notice
wondered what the white stuff was. You know, that just doesn't look.
And that was something else I was wondering too, because you see it on every one of them.
Yeah. So they may use some kind of lead paint sealer or something like this. I suspect this is at the turn of the century. So.
Yeah. Mike, I'd love to have a copy of that picture.
Okay. By the way, the pictures here are pictures that I've gleaned from the internet. And if it's one that you have the copyright on, I apologize. I'm just giving you honor for having such a great picture.
Mike, also, can you tell everybody that you posted these notes and things on the forum, please?
Yeah, on the forum, there'll be a copy of this presentation and handout, so you can go in there and download them. It's about a 6 megabyte file.
Cowcatcherdivision.org. Across the top is a members area, and go into the members area, hit the drop down, and there's a forum there, and you can find listings there for different things like that.
Okay, so pictures. Pictures denote a couple of things. One is the era, and as I said earlier, the era is really important. Transition era from 1946 to 1960s is a really popular era. You'll see structures that came from the turn of the century all the way to new things. In the 60s, they really started changing building styles. And then more modern is the 1960s to current. And, you know, you will have some of those transition era structures, but you'll have a lot of new building styles. Butler buildings became, or I should say the corrugated metal buildings that were prefab became very common for a lot of businesses during that period. The brick and mortar still was around from earlier, but they didn't build a whole lot of new brick and mortar in some cases. So it's really important in your pictures to get the right era. Sources for those photographs, my favorite is Shorpy, although it's in black and white and it doesn't always have colors. You know, I can put a topic in there and find a picture of it and just learn so much about the details that make things look more real. You can also use Google Earth, and I'll come on to a photograph later that actually showed Google Earth photograph and a regular Shorpy photograph, and you can really see what happened to that building over time. Of course, books, periodicals, a great place, believe it or not, is a library or online library services. The schools have a lot of good libraries for your particular region. If you're modeling in Texas, historical Texas, Facebook group is a good one. There are many, many out there. So let's talk about paint. This is a pretty big section about paint because it's always a dilemma, what color to paint your structures. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about brick and steel here. I'm talking more about wood, but I'm also talking about trim. This is a color swatch, I think, from mid-century modern. And, you know, white was always popular. In fact, you see a lot of photographs and they're in black and white and everything looks like it's white, but in fact, they weren't necessarily white. So this will help you pick some of the colors. There's different aspects of colors that I want to discuss today. One of them's making the color subtle, match your era, and then disaggregation, which some people might call weathering, but I loathe that term. And you can do that with filters, washes, pigments, and dry brushing. We're going to talk about each one of those. It's kind of hard for me to ask how many people have seen the realistic color video by Trolls Kirk. It is absolutely fantastic. It's available again for about 17, 18 bucks, I think, online someplace. But this video really gave me a different perspective of how to paint structures. Trolls Kirk is an artist, and there's no way that I could hope to ever match anything close to what he does. But all of the structures here, the siding and everything is paper. He uses art paper and paints it. And instead of applying some of the disaggregation techniques later on, pigments, washes, etc., he paints it like that originally. Of course, he's an artist and he has the eye for that and does that. But he doesn't apply those mediums, alcohol, India ink, and all that stuff afterwards. It's all in the original paint. And if you can do that, it's terrific because it gives you a lot of flexibility later on. So Trolls Kirk, and I'll have a link in the handout if you want to look at more of his work. He's got, I think, a website, and it's just inspiring. Even though Trolls lives in Norway, I think he has been all over, and he loves the Northeast, and he models an ON30. So anyway, Trolls Kirk, that style is really cool. So you need to match the paint to your era. This photograph on the left looks like a Home Depot. In fact, for that time period, it was a Home Depot. I think that's in the 40s. You can see they used a really bright color. So saying to use subtle colors isn't always appropriate, but not every single structure on your layout. Go to your templates for those kind of things. The photograph on the right is the same period. I think that's Chicago. And it's the same period. And look, old brick structures here, new modern glass structures here. And you can get a picture, a point of view on what makes it look more realistic. Shiny, bright, silvers, grays, or orange. So, match your era and your location. This is a pretty interesting structure, and I just want to show you what you can do. Fields Department Store, you can tell that's in the 40s, it looks like, from Shorpy. Was a pretty nice looking building. It almost looks mid-century modern the way it's styled. But look what they've done to it these days. This is in New York, of course, and this photograph came from Google Earth. And it's amazing what they've done to it. They've added a third story. You can still see traces of the other one. They've modernized it with all the different colors and their color theme. So, you can take an old kit building and modify it to really look more appropriate for your era. You might not see this because when I go in a lot of the old downtown areas here in Texas, I notice that they have been modernized, but the original structure still stands. So that's one way to make your buildings look more realistic. Again, you need to start with a photo. So I'm going to run through the color swatches right quick. Match your era with the paint colors. This is a vintage time period, probably before 1900.
Where do you get your color swatches, Mike?
Pardon?
Where do you
on
get
the
your color
internet?
swatches? Off the internet. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, all this stuff's on the internet. When I started thinking about color swatches, at first I started with model colors, and I said, that's wrong. Go out and get the prototype. So that's what I did, and I just searched for a lot of these are Sherman-Williams. Went to their site and searched for different period swatches. So here you'll see, here's another one. This is 1900 to 1920. A lot of things were white, but they also used these subtle colors. In our Texas Western, Ken Marcoux has been painting a lot of Craftsman kits, and he's painted some wild colors, and I thought he was crazy for not making them all white. And then I see the color swatches, and he's hit it dead on for the period. So, color swatches can really guide you and help you in picking out. And you can get most of these colors in acrylics at the craft stores. So, it's not hard to match.
Where did you find these vintage swatches?
Online, I Googled for them, searched for them. And I just looked for colors in 1940. And these will all be in the handout, so you'll have them there too. So anyway, this is from 1940. And I love the one down that's pink that says baby boom. That's pretty funny. But you can see the different colors that were popular on houses. And when I grew up, my dad painted our white house almost a color of this post and beam with a coral, this color trim on all the windows. And that was really in the 50s. So let's look at the 50s and here's some of those colors that were popular there. So getting prototype colors from a particular period really, help your models look more realistic. Any questions about color swatches before I go on? Okay. So if you don't paint like Trolls Kirk and get your color dead on to begin with, or your look dead on, the next thing, pardon?
I'm sorry, this is Daryl. Hey, on the colors, if we went back to the colors there, you don't necessarily have to go back, but anyway, on the colors you were talking about, if, as in our layout, we're modeling early or late 50s, early 60s. You could have some from the 40s and in housing areas and things like that, because not everybody paints their houses every few years. So I think the point maybe I'm trying to make is you would want to not have newer than what your era is. Is that kind of in line?
That's an excellent point, and probably one I should have brought up, but that's spot on. You are going to have colors from earlier eras, but you shouldn't have anything from a later era necessarily. I guess you could get away with it, but it depends on how you wanted to, faithfully you wanted to stick to a particular era. Thank you, Daryl. So now I want to talk about disaggregation, and there's several techniques that we've all used. These are the most common. I wish we had practical exercise where you could practice these, but we'll have to save that for another day. So I'll talk about filters, washes, pigments, and dry brushing. How many people have heard of a filter before? I can't see a raise of hands necessarily, but have you heard of filters? Is that a common term you've used? Well, I got it from military modelers, so I didn't make it up myself. Military modelers just have a way of taking something that looks plain and simple, that's plastic or resin, and making it look real. And they do that with filters and washes. A filter is really a blend of colors that tone down the base coat or change the base coat, the way it looks. You apply a filter pretty much over the entire structure that you're building. A filter subtly changes the color and tone, but it stays in the same tonal value. It's not darker and it's not lighter, but it is a different color. It's easiest to apply to a flat finish in my experience. So let's look at this structure here. This has had a filter put over the entire structure. In fact, it's had two filters put on. First of all, it had a light gray misted over everything. And I mean, it was light. It was super light. It was just almost clear. But it left the impression that it was all one homogeneous building built from the side. The second thing that I did was I used a rust color. As you can see, the roof is heavily rusted, but there's some rust on the sides of corrugated metal. But I wanted to give everything sort of that tone of looking rusted in that period, road hard, put up wet, something from the 20s. And
Mike, are you applying those filters with an airbrush?
These in particular I did. I had used filters on some other models that I'll show in a minute with a brush, but most of the time I apply them with an airbrush. You get the same effect whenever you apply a fine mist of white paint over the horizon or on clouds. It kind of puts a mist over everything and makes it look the same. Not, bright blue someplace and bright blue someplace else.
So I'd like to ask this, and maybe you're going to cover it here in a minute. As far as a filter, are you saying that you actually apply a physical filter, or are you just applying a coat of paint over it to filter the color through that new overlay of color.
I guess I should say what he said.
Okay.
That is spot on. And, you know, I hope I didn't confuse anybody. It's the first time I've given this clinic. So, you know, I'm going to learn from good comments like that. It's not a filter on a picture or anything. This is actually paint. I would say, you know, 1% paint, the rest thinner. And you have to be careful that you don't wash out all your detail, which I did on this one the first time I painted it. It's had about 3 coats of paint to get it right for me. Okay, the one we're probably the most familiar with is alcohol and India ink is a paint wash, but I want to go into a little bit different perspective on washes. A wash is applied to parts of a model, not the entire model, as opposed to the, I just got ahead of myself, and close to the entire model. So you do it parts, not the whole thing. And it makes those parts look darker in most cases, but it can make them look lighter. It's applied in a small area on a model with a small brush, and you try to flow it along the lines and crevices and corners to make those have more depth. We probably have a habit from classes that I've taught and many other well-renowned people have taught, where you just coat a side of a building with alcohol and India ink. And, you know, that does give you some effect, but if you have a white building, it turns it gray, and maybe you don't want it to be gray. So there are techniques to go along the edges and corners to highlight with a wash. A wash is a different color than a base. It can be lighter or darker. And believe it or not, it is best applied to a glossy surface. Now, it's tough to take a structure and, you know, put a glossy surface on it and then put a wash on it, but you will be shocked at how much better it works. If you do detail parts, especially, it lets those washes flow into all the corners and really highlights them. Let's take a look at some washes applied to this particular structure. This one had washes applied in the corners and along the edges. As you can see on these cornices around the windows, it had a little bit of wash applied just around some of the brick. Actually, this little rusted area here was a wash. And you can just see that it does highlight detail and cause it to kind of jump out. This building looks pretty good when it was just first painted, but it was very dead and flat looking. There was, you know, even though there's brick and crevices in the windows, they just didn't show up. And you can see I applied a little bit of a wash right here to make it look like the mortar was coming out, starting to break down or decompose. So that's washes. Any questions about washes before I go into dry brushing? Okay, dry brushing. This was a fairly new technique to me in 2007. I had never used it before then, but I went to a class and they were doing dry brushing, and I went, holy cow, that's really cool. Dry brushing highlights the details on a structure. It's usually light colors, and my favorites are flesh and sometimes an off-white. You brush with paint, and you load the brush up and then you unload it, get rid of almost all the paint. You can see that in the picture where this person is really unloading the brush, and it's to the point where there's almost no color when you brush it on a towel or a terry cloth. My favorite thing's an old washcloth. I keep one at by my paint area, and I dampen a little bit, but I get rid of almost all the paint when I dry brush. And then I apply it to the raised details. You can take a plastic roof with shingles, and after you've used a wash on the undersides and dry brush the tops, you can't tell that that's plastic if it's a good structure. It's really amazing what dry brushing can do. So it accents details, corners, edges, things that might fade away as you look at them. You know, we're looking at things from a 2 or 3 foot distance, and a lot of details kind of fade away. So you don't want to necessarily make it a caricature, but you want to bring those out to make it look a little more realistic. So dry brushing is an excellent way to do that. Here's a model that I use dry brushing on extensively. All of those shingles those are individually applied cedar shingles, and they've all been dry brushed with flesh color. I did apply a wash of black ahead of time, and then did the white or actually flesh on top of that. I did some dry brushing here with the rust colors on the pipes. I also went over the entire structure with a dry brush of the flesh color. It's not a really great photo blown up, but hopefully you can get the point of what dry brushing can do. I dry brush the corners of the structures and also the mullions, and that just makes those stand out. Otherwise, they kind of disappeared with the paint color. And then if you're doing details, dry brushing can really add a lot too. And here, although it doesn't appear so, these have all been dry brushed. I try and dry brush wooden things with flesh color. That Dave Ravalia did that, and that's where I picked up the habit. And there may be better ways, but that's what I do. So dry brushing. Any questions about dry brushing? I'd like to have you now take out your paint brushes and unload the paint and take the sample building you have and dry brush it. So let's look at pigments.
So Mike, are you going to talk about the different types of brushes that somebody might want to use for those types of dry brushing?
No, I probably should. Let me make a note to add that. That's a good point. Dry brushing is best done with a stiffer brush because you don't want it to follow the contours. You want it to stay stiff and just highlight the contours. So I would use probably a flat, stiffer brush. In fact, I have some that have been worn down from dry brushing, and they're pretty stiff. I wouldn't try to use a soft brush or a round brush for dry brushing, just a flat, stiff. Does that kind of make the point?
Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing that up. So pigments. Pigments are another thing I didn't know anything about until 2007, and I fell in love with pigments. Wow, they would let you do incredible things with colors on a structure. They're nothing more than ground up minerals, the same stuff that's in paint. They just don't have a fixative to carry them. They're just the powder itself. Some pigments have chalk in them. I don't really like to use those necessarily because when you take a photograph, all the white in the chalk base shows up and the color doesn't necessarily show up. So chalk-based pigments aren't necessarily one of my favorites. They do have their purposes and places for use, and I'll show you that in a minute. But you can find pigments either dry or mixed with oil or wax, like some of the pastel type things. Here's probably a pretty common thing I've seen. People take a divider like this and put all the different colors in it and keep it handy. I've mixed pigments a lot with mineral spirits and use that to wash something or to denote a color or to an area, and it seems to work pretty well. I've tried alcohol and it's okay, but I just really like the way mineral spirits handle. One of the things that I found out in washes and in filters, but more in washes, is that certain things go well over another type. A better way to say that is that if you have an acrylic, it might not be best to put a wash on an acrylic that's dead flat. Especially if the wash is alcohol based, it'll probably lift the acrylic up. It just doesn't seem to work very well. Um, Oil and spirits works well, and pigments and spirits work well on almost everything, but they work better on glossy colors. Here's a building I did years ago. This was before it had anything really done to it as far as holes. This was a structure gantry cabin on top of Cat's Head. And this tar paper, or rolled roofing as people call it, is really nothing more than 400 grit sandpaper sprayed flat. And then I rubbed green chalk on it, sprayed it with dull coat, put a couple more coats of green chalk on it, and then went over it with a wash of some rust colors. Later on, there were some structures added on top of this gantries, for instance, and booms that rusted and caused this drip down. So that was a use for chalk, and I wasn't getting the effect that I wanted by just using pigments, so I went to the chalk based, and that seemed to work pretty well. Okay, here's another place where I used a lot of pigments on Cat's Head, renamed Gulf Sand and Gravel. See down here at the bases of all of these, or many of these posts, that was done with a pigment and mineral spirits. Also, there's some around the pilings and around the retainer wall here on the wharf. So pigments really came into play on this by mixing it with mineral spirits to help it flow and stick. Although a lot of the pigments have things in them that cause them to, additives that cause them to stick. Okay. Any questions on paint before I go to roofing? Okay. So roofing is probably what we see first on a model structure. For me, I put more attention on the roof than I do on anything else. And I've just kind of learned that over the times from not being happy with what I saw. So this roof, for instance, on this structure has rolled roofing on it. It was really more of the 400 grits sandpaper, emery, the wet and dry paper. But there's a lot of detail on here that kind of shows what's going on. If you look here, you've got some birds that have been up here on top of this chimney. You can see that there's a kitchen down there someplace. They've got a big vent there, and they have a vent over here for toiletries. This period is the 1945 to 50 time period. So there was an antenna on top. Somebody had been up top doing some kind of work. So there's a shovel up there and a little bit of water still remaining and some old boards. You can see how water has stained the top, probably from the soot from the air, pollution, and pooled in a couple of spots. So you can see quite a bit from this roof. So roofing is really an area that I think you ought to focus on heavily when you're trying to make a model look more realistic. Roofing is normally wooden shingles, asphalt shingles, rolled roofing, corrugated metal, standing seam, gravel, slate. I mean, you can add just about any kind of roofing that seems appropriate for the era and the type of structure that you're using. This is top of a Masonic lodge in Cleburne, Texas. Used to be an old theater, the old Liberty Theater, and they've just used standard rolled roofing, but you can see the tar lines where they just put hot tar down and roll those things out. You can see a water puddle here where it didn't drain, which led to a lot of problems, by the way, but, and a lot of money. But you can see where someone is painted, halfway painted up down here at the end. And, you can get quite a bit. A couple of stovepipes here for toilet vents. And so a picture can tell you a lot and help you with your models. So there are a lot of different types. This is corrugated metal up here. This is a whole lot of stuff. Started a long time ago. And, we don't really realize it, but, in the 20s and 30s, people were just absolutely dead broke poor. They didn't have anything for anything. They reused everything they could get their hands on. And
that's a very good point. That's an extremely good point. If you go out in the more rural areas, what you're showing right there, you'll find that on old barns and sheds and things like that, where there'd be 2 or 3 different colors of rolled roofing and patches and plywood and everything else on the top of a roof. That's a very good picture, Mike.
They didn't call their insurance company and get a new roof. There were no insurance companies then, hardly.
Yeah.
So, that's a way to make something look realistic. You just don't want to put it on every structure, but it does add a lot of interest in that particular building. Tells a pretty big story. This building here at the bottom is a really old stone building, and you can tell this is from the 1800s, but the corrugated metal they used on the top has rusted totally. I'm not sure if it was ever painted. So that tells a pretty good story, and it makes a nice structure. It's been patched with one new piece of corrugated metal, so another way to make that building look a little more realistic. The final one down here, it just shows there's some detailed things that go on the roof. This one has an entryway to get on the roof to work on that sign. And there's a skylight there, chimney, some tools from doing some work. So a lot of different types of roofing, and you can get a lot of detail in something like that. I really like this. I don't remember
awesome.
Where I got this or who did it, but this was fantastic. The bird's nest with the birds. This is really blown up, but this is a pretty small scale, and it really looks pretty terrific. A lot of the buildings in the old days had signs, and we'll talk about those a little bit more in a minute, but there's a lot of interest in this particular picture. This depicts one of the things that I love about working on roofs or any structure, and that's adding action, some type of work going on, some kind of detail. I don't recall where this came from, but I love they're out there putting tar on the roof. They've got all the workers out there. I've got a burner, a kettle full of tar. Very interesting. And this can add a lot of realism to some of your models to add something like this. Here's another roof. This is a stone roof, an aggregate roof. And, a lot of the kits give you aggregate to put on, but that stuff is so big that in reality, it's probably, 3 or 4 inches across, and they actually use, 1/2 inch or less, probably finer. So try and make those aggregate roofs really fine. Using Z-scale ballast would work well, or N-scale ballast maybe, but that's why I use sandpaper. I use different grits of sandpaper and paint them and then weather them up, and that seems to have about the right look. Here in this detail, you see the sign again. You see a lot of signs of birds on that sign. You see chimneys. Here's a can that's been worked. Here's some guys up here probably sloughing off, having a good time, staying away from the boss. So you can get a lot of detail on your roofs and make them look much more realistic. So a list of the things you can do: smokestacks, air conditioning units. Even in the 40s and 50s, commercial buildings started having air conditioning units, TV antennas, birds, skylights, roof, doorway, signs, rust, ladders, paper, guy wires, action scene, patches on roofs, repairs to roofs or buildings, lights, walkways, or just nothing at all. Sometimes nothing is a lot better than making it too heavily weathered. One of the problems I have, and I love George Celios's layout, and it's one of my favorites that I've been to, but it's almost depressing to go in there because everything looks so road hard and put up wet. It's very tired, very old, 1920s. very desperate time in America, and it looks it. Sometimes just putting nothing can look terrific. And I still like George Selos's layout. It's one of my favorites that I've ever been to. But sometimes doing a little bit less will be more appropriate on layout.
Mr. Corley, you have a question in chat there from Reggie
Oh, see,
Thompson.
I can't see chat.
Okay, let me read you the question. And if you go over to the bottom where of the screen in your regular view, but that's okay. You can't, because I don't want you to get off of your presentation. I'll just read you the question. Your technique for decals on the roof, what process works best versus just water decal application? Your example on the Oriental Depot building, for instance.
Oh, okay. That one was, I actually printed that on with my laser printer on a piece of tissue paper. It wasn't toilet tissue, but you know, the tissue paper like wrapping. And that's something Leo Politti or Lori Politti actually shared with me to get it thinner. And so that's what I used. And I just printed straight on that, trimmed around it, put it down with a diluted canopy glue, and it seemed to work okay. You can't work those too much because it'll dissolve them, but that's what I use. Decals work great as long as you use Solvaset or something to work it into crevices, and then go over it with some type of matting. Something I haven't really talked about in the paint area was that, you know, matte is really, really the best way to go over a building. If you take a look at a drone or a aerial shot of buildings, you don't see anything shiny, very, very rarely. So, you know, matte is the best way to go for that. Does that answer that question?
I think it does. Also, which spawned another question. Do you have a problem with that tissue paper feeding into your printer?
No, that's a good point. What Lori did and what I learned from her was to actually tape the tissue paper to a carrier sheet, which is just a plain regular piece of paper. And that worked. It took me a couple of times to figure out where to put the tape and things like that, but that really worked well.
Okay.
It's surprising. I didn't think you could get tissue paper through there, but Lori said you could do it, so I stuck with it till I did.
Good. Jay Waters, excuse me. I really apologize for my cough, guys. Jay Waters adds, as an architect, the most important element that I see missing from roofs are roof drains and or scuppers.
Very good point. Very good point. I can't add any to that. That's a good point. Good detail. You know, we don't see them on models that much. On some of the, I think on one of the structures that I showed that had a drain on it, but some of the more modern kits are coming out with those, but that's a good thing to add. Thank you, Jay. Anything else before we get into windows?
No, you're doing good.
Okay. Here's a pirated photo of an interesting window. This has got a combination of, it looks like a leaded window with a regular window with a Venetian blind. Windows add a tremendous amount to the look of a model. You can do all the right painting, get the roof right and everything, but if you don't treat your windows well, the way you detail them, you're going to have a less than perfect model. At first, I didn't know what to do with the windows on Leonard's Optenhoff's Memorial Drugstore. He was a pharmacist in the Texas Western who we all loved, and so I named this after him. But this is Ed Fulitz, and unless you wanted to knock out the windows, they're just a cast indentation. So what I did was painted it flat black and said, you know, I can add curtains to that or Venetian blinds or whatever and add a lot more realism. So that's what I did.
And those curtains hanging out the window. I spotted that on a previous slide, and that is an amazingly good detail. Amazingly good detail.
Yeah,
Where
it's
those curtains are hanging out the window like that. That's great.
so what I did is I actually went online and looked for pictures of curtains, scaled them down to size, printed them, and then actually to get them kind of where they were pliable, I didn't print them on tissue paper because I wanted more opaqueness. I put them on regular paper and did the old trick of sanding off the back and then using a little moisture and actually, you know, rubbing my finger on it and reducing the thickness of the paper. That made them fairly pliable. So I was able to bend folds and those kind of things in there. I don't know where I learned that, saw that someplace, but I really, really, really liked it.
One of the things that sets this off, if I can add a little thing to your presentation here, the signage that you have on this building really sets the time period, especially the fallout shelter sign.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, when I decided to, you know, the era for this, I went out and looked, you know, what was popular in the 50s and looked for photographs of buildings in the 50s. And I saw this telephone sign sticking out of one.
Yep.
The fallout shelter was another one. I saw one with a Hires root beer. I like that. And then a lot of them just were there. You couldn't see through the window for all the signs. And these windows you don't see through because once again, they're just indentations. So I painted them a gray, and then I actually sprayed the backs of the windows with dull coat after I got the signs on. So that kind of muted that you couldn't see through and made them more translucent rather than transparent.
So the other day I happened to be in Cracker Barrel having a meal. And if you ever go inside of a Cracker Barrel, their decor inside the dining room has tons of this time frame signs in there.
You know,
you can take pictures and then come back, print the pictures from your photographs, and now you've got an excellent firsthand replication of that sign. You can also download them off the web, but yeah.
That's a good trick. I got a lot of these signs from Blair Line. I kind of like their stuff, so I did that. But a lot of them I got free just by Googling and years ago in the 90s, I bought a lot of signs because they weren't available. There was no internet to speak of. So anyway, I used a photograph to kind of guide me in what I put on here. So there's drinks, telephones, tobacco, keys made, you name it, all that was in there. So you can tell so much from a picture. Here's some windows that really are cool. I love it that they have Venetian blinds. What I like the most is if you've ever seen some old buildings with Venetian blinds broken, you can do that. Actually, I think there's a program, I don't remember the name of it, from Evan Designs that will print Venetian blinds in different scales. And you can do a lot with these. I think these are probably laser cut Venetian blinds, but I'm not sure. They've got them different colors, wood tone, white. But that's really a neat thing to add a lot of interest. And they've been pretty uniform in this one, in the types of Venetian blinds I use. So that's a cool thing. Here's a cool thing about this building. You see Venetian blinds. You see curtains everywhere. Some are open, some are closed, some are open with nothing going on, some are opened with lighting going on. This is obviously the Gilmore building. And then down in the bottom, you can see through the windows and see the activity going on. So once again, you've got some action happening there. So this is kind of a cool thing to add to some of your DPM buildings or other nice buildings. Makes them look more realistic than just plain glass. Any questions on windows before I move on to interiors? Okay, interiors. How are we doing on time?
Take as much time as you want, buddy.
Okay, so I have 150 more slides to go. And
Not a problem. Not a problem.
I'm joking.
We will bear with you.
No, I don't have too many more. As you can see, we're getting towards the bottom. So interiors, if you're going to build a building and have clear windows in it, if it's a background building, you know, I wouldn't go to a lot of trouble on the interior. You can put something in there. But anytime you put an interior inside a lighted building, boy, does that add interest. And sometimes I call that the little surprise. People will get down close and look and they go, oh my, you know, they can see what's happening inside. This is actually a photograph of a real little, actually it was a pharmacy, but it looks like it was a deli. And you can see a lot going on. Well, some cool things, people have done some cool things with those. And we'll talk a little bit about interior details in a minute. This is probably one of my favorite models. And if you ever saw this in person, you just would be so amazed. I think this was a Revalia and Brian Nolan collaboration. They showed at one of the Craftsman Structure shows. I think it's still at Suncoast Models or something like that out west. But this building alone is just terrific. But look at that interior. Does that make that look real or not? Mm-hmm. It's well lit. It's got all of the different powered tools. I mean, this is just over the top terrific. And it's done, the lighting sets it off. If those things were in there, it would look cool, but not that cool.
Suncoast is in Florida.
Thank you. It is in Suncoast is in Florida. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, what scale was that, by the way?
Oh, it's O scale. They did almost everything in O scale. The Revalia, Brian Nolan, those guys. You can see the whole plethora. I think Modvid down in Australia has a collection of just about every one of those. This is kind of unique. When I saw this, you know, the building's not all that impressive. The curtains aren't that impressive. But what I really liked is this interior is nothing but a photograph. So if you can get a photograph of an interior and glue it on the inside, boy, does that give you a cheap thrill, so to speak, of looking in and seeing all that detail inside. So that would especially be good in background buildings, but you might have luck with that in foreground. And, you know, since we can change the scales of things so much in computers, printing this on a color printer is really easy to do, just mounting on a piece of cardboard or plastic. And you could have it set back a little bit or right up there at the front, but that does add a lot of realism and interest. Another thing on interiors, this was my first building to ever, it tells you how old this is, to ever really do anything on the interior. And although you can't see it, these two windows here look into different rooms in this warehouse. And one of them has 55-gallon drums. This is an oil company after all, stacked up, both a printed picture of a whole bunch of them, and then three-dimensional models too. And so when you look in the window up close, it actually looks like there's a little bit of everything in there. So that was kind of cool. The other thing that I tried to do is add a little interest on this opening. You know, I mean, having closed doors all the time doesn't denote much action, so it gets kind of boring. So what happens when you add a little detail in there? So this has Venetian blinds. It's got actually work plans or work order on the little desk there. Has a calendar, which was very, very popular in those days to have. There weren't many women in the workplace where men were working, and so they had all kinds of not appropriate these days things on the walls. So there's also signs around that, and there's some other signs inside there. So that's just a little technique. It's always a little surprise. It's kind of fun to do. Any questions on interiors before we go on, or comments?
Yeah, comment about the posters and stuff and calendars and all that stuff. I work in a steel mill, and I heard that was an issue all the way up into the 80s and 90s. So,
Oh, hey, let me tell you, in the Army in the 70s, I was in Europe, and we had women came into our organization for the first time. We were the first organization to have women in Europe as an engineer, construction engineer outfit. And it was really funny. When they moved in, the women started putting up posters of Ben in their lockers and in their rooms. And I tell you what, the battalion commander almost had a heart attack. I mean, he had the sergeant major, the first sergeants, he was mad. And they said, hey, if you have them for the men, you got to let the women have them too. And I think that's when Playgirl magazine came out at that time. So there were a lot of those, and he just couldn't abide that. So he made everybody take their calendars down or their posters down. About a month later, we started a 3-week program on sex relations in the workplace. So it's kind of apropos. That was like 72 or 3. But anyway, good point. Good point. Well, I just blew that. Let's try again.
By the way, Mike, if some of you guys want to look at some of the photographs that are available, there's a website called let's see, what is the name of this guy? I'm trying to find it. Well, I can't find it. I thought it was on there. That it's talking about the interiors that you can print those pictures, or you can buy the pictures, but I'm not finding it. I thought I had it here, but I'm not looking at it right. So I apologize. Continue on.
Okay, it says I'm paused. Oh, there we go. Okay. So can everybody see that lighting? We okay?
Nope. We're back on your original printers, the original design. There you go. Now you're getting back into it. There. Yep.
Okay, so lighting, especially if you operate in darker times on your layout, lighting adds so much to a layout. I mean, it even does it during the day, but at night it really brings in a lot. Here you can see the sign, what's playing at the theater, street lamps, just a lot of lights all over. Up here in the buildings, lighting going on just makes it look real. Look at this photograph. I mean, granted, the street is wet and reflecting it, but look at all the lights. Before the internet and TV, they didn't have so much color going on, and they didn't have any way of seeing advertising. So everybody used every ounce of space they had on their buildings and put signs up. I used to think Ken Marcoux was a little overboard on his putting signs on top. And then I started looking around, and sure enough, all the buildings had these signs on top. Some were lighted, some weren't, but it adds a lot of character and interest. And if you don't operate your layout at night or in the dark, that is a real treat. And having lighted structures really adds a lot to it. Here's some pictures of some lighting going on. Here's some subtle lights in a workshop, and it looks like a garage. And it just during the day, you might not see all of these wrenches on the wall, all these belts, gaskets, different things that just make this dynamite to look at. And the lighting really adds to it. It makes it all visible. Lighting here tells the story of what's happening. This is a company that's doing some work. You see a light up here on the inside, makes somebody is upstairs doing something, and then here in the warehouse. So, and then finally, once again, beautiful buildings. Looks like some Ed Fulitz models again, but the signs on the side, but everything's lit. So it just makes it look real. Here's another structure similar to the other that shows a machine shop. I think we looked at it earlier, all brightly lit. But you can see how the lights hang down, kind of like task lights. One's over the lathe, vice machines, different machine shop tools. And that just adds a lot of realism by adding those. Those aren't particularly bright, but they serve the purpose of making that look pretty real. There's a lot of lighting resources out there. These will be in the handout, along with a lot of other things.
Hey, before you check off the lighting there, there's a Groups IO group called Scale Illumination.
Yes.
Definitely worth checking that one out.
Scale Illumination.
Yeah, it's in Groups IO.
Okay.
It's run by a guy named John Niemeyer, a good friend of mine. It is a really nice site, and you talked about toning down colors and things like that. One of the things that we tend to do with lighting is we use the same bulb off the same power source, so all the lights are the same color and the same brightness level. And getting them where they're different colors and some are dimmer than others is really neat. But the Scale Illumination guys really get into the fact that a lot of times our lights are way too bright on our railroads, and toning those down. It's kind of like having sound in a locomotive. If those locomotives were really that loud, you'd hear them from 20 miles away. But they really do a great job, and they're really good about trading techniques and things on that site. So it's worth checking out.
Thanks, Dwayne. No, that's a really good point. Well, while we're kind of looking at the other resources here, has anybody seen the interiors you can buy now for certain structures that are all made up? Does anybody know the name of those?
That's what I was looking for a minute ago.
Roomettes?
Roomettes, that's it.
What is it?
You, Dwayne. Roomettes.com.
Roomette.
There's also a guy on eBay called Gold Medal or
Gold Rush.
What is it? Gold Rush Bay Models, and excuse me, he does 3D printed structures and interiors for them as well.
Oh, cool. Thank you. I'll put all these in the notes. Add them in.
Mike, do you mind if I share just a second on this roomettes?
Sure.
Hold on a second.
No, I don't mind. Sure,
Okay.
Go ahead.
You're going to have to start sharing again in a minute, but
no problem.
If you look at that, all of those storefronts are photographs that he put in, and he did that. You can buy all of those, and he's got a list here in HONO. But here's all the different things he's got: hotels, auto parts stores, a taxi or an inside of a garage, apartment buildings, a fire hall. Here's another gas station right here. And then page 2, a variety store. He's got a jewelry store. Here's this one, the one that you see over here that says Ohio Shipping. Pat McCarthy over in Mississippi put that inside of an REA building. Turned out really, really well. Really well. And then the third page, he keeps adding these all the time. There's a brewery, a bookstore, a paint store. So you just got a hobby shop even.
Yeah, the other thing you have to be careful of with these is the perspective of how his roomette is laid out you're putting it in.
Yeah.
Because if you're putting it into a building and your vantage point on your layout is looking from the left, but he's got everything drawn for you to be looking into the room from the right, the perspective is going to be off, and it really stands out.
Yeah, several of those are actually built where, they're intended for certain buildings, like that Monroe Tower in there. I believe that one was actually for the very, very well-known Atlas interlocking tower. He doesn't necessarily mention it right there in that description. You have to click it and then go through and read it and might allude to what it'll fit. But I wished he put it in the front where you would see if you had fill in the blank building, you could see right immediately what to go for. But
And one of the things that you, on those roomettes, if you've not used them before, they actually build out in like a little square. And if you get the lighting, the one that's done for a lighting, it's got a slot in the top of it so that you can put one of those plug-in lights from like Woodland Scenics or whatever, and sit it in there in the top, and it illuminates it just perfectly. So, Mike, if you want to go ahead and start sharing again.
Okay.
Thank you. Didn't mean to take your presentation away from you.
Oh no, this is what it's all about. You know, that's what I love about clinics, especially when they're interactive. This one's a little unique in that we're on Zoom, but I learned so much. Okay, we're going to talk about signs now. This is a really bad photograph, but like I said earlier, signs were everywhere in certain periods because there was no internet, there was, no TV, there's no color anything available like that, even newspapers. So everybody had signs. They made the use of every ounce of space in their buildings. They used billboards everywhere. This screen just shows a couple of samples. This is a very early period, probably 1800s and early 1900s, and then these going up from there. I remember growing up, there were billboard signs all along the highways before ordinances, and it was always fun to look at those and see what they had. They had sayings and things like that.
And the Burma shaves are a great way to add attention to your layout.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So, once again, one of my favorite sign techniques is on a brick building painted on. I didn't do this, but it looks terrific. When I travel around in some of the smaller towns, old towns in Texas, where they've torn down one building and next to it, the other building remains, it'll reveal a sign like this. Very common almost in every single town. And that's how they advertise. They painted them on brick. The easiest way to do this is, once again, either use a decal on decal paper or use tissue paper or even plain paper if you want to thin the back, and work it into the brick, and then apply some washes and filters.
Downtown Dallas is full of that.
Yeah.
If you look for it, you can find it. If you just idly go down the street, you'll miss it. But if you really look hard, you can find those signs still painted in buildings in downtown Dallas.
Speaking of downtown Dallas, that was really a good segue. Thank you. This is downtown Dallas. Another Shorpy photograph. You can tell that this is appears to be in early 40s or late 30s. But look at all the signs all the way down the street. As far as you can see, there are signs. Now, these are illuminated signs, but which you can get from a variety of folks.
That's looking west on Elm Street, from the top of Elm Street down by Deep Ellum, when Elm Street was two ways.
Well, thank you. I was going to ask you, I know that you knew all about downtown Dallas.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you specifically where this was.
If you see there, and the way that I was able to locate that, you see the sign for the Majestic there on the side, on the right-hand side.
Yes.
About halfway down the street there. And so that would be where that picture was taken, at the top of the hill. Dealey Plaza is where that's leading to, and the street is headed down there. But
so are we looking west or east?
You're looking west.
That's what I thought. Okay. So, but the point of this is, look at all the signs. I mean, depending on the period of your layout, you can't have too many signs. Okay, we already looked at the signs in this one, so I'll gloss over this. But as you can see, signs were everywhere. Well, folks, that's really all I'm going to take time on today. We talked about how important it is to have a picture of your era and your location, and something similar to what you're building, if you can start with that. how important paint is. And you can start with painting to the color you want without having to add filters or washes later. Or you can add a filter, a wash, or a pigment or something like that. We talked about roofing, and roofing being important because roofing is the first thing folks see on a structure if they're standing over it. And so you really want those to look realistic. Windows add a lot of character to a building and make it look much more realistic. And for those who get up close with the little surprises, the interiors add just one more dimension to making a structure look realistic. Lighting, what can I say about lighting? I mean, if you're in the dark, lighting helps. And you'll have a new excitement if you can start lighting your models and operate in the dark sometime. Oops, I have a bad slide here. Signs was the last one, not figures. That's a whole new better way. So anyway, that's it. That's all I have. Are there any questions? Anybody
I'll
care
make a
for a minute?
comment, Mr. Corley. I don't know if you're aware of the clinic Jim Sacco did. He's done it at a national convention in Atlanta when I saw it. And I know he's done it for the NMRAX clinics. He's the one that owns City Classics.
Okay.
He has done a clinic, a very nice one, especially if you're doing downtown buildings in the transition era. He calls it Modernizing Main Street. And it is a very, very eye-opening clinic as far as how a lot of those downtown buildings were updated and modernized and everything, and really how a lot of those DPM buildings that we know in Walther's buildings that we know and love so much are really not accurate for 40s and 50s in some degree. So if you check that one out sometime, it's pretty neat.
Thank you very much. That's good. Appreciate it. Any other comments?
Also, Mike, John Lawrence from San Antonio, member of the LSR, did a clinic on NMRAX. He, with a brief interlude from Miles Hale at the start of it, they did a clinic on signs, and it's an extremely good clinic. John did probably 90% of the clinic, and when he did, it's about an hour and 15 minutes. Dwayne, is that about right for that clinic?
Yeah, probably so.
And
he really gets into the weeds into what
he does
is era appropriate for
Yeah.
signs, and really breaks it down into from this point until this point, they were painted onto the side of the wall. They were typically black on white or white on black, and really gets into the hows and the whys. And one of the things that he pointed out is a mistake that I've made in getting overly fancy with fonts. We have so many to choose from now. And so now we kind of go around looking for something special. But, when he pointed out that a lot of that stuff was, hand painted on, so it was really blocky, really plain. So it does a lot. You mentioned using a photograph, going out and doing a Google search for, 1940s advertising is, can help you out a lot if that's where your model is set in, and seeing what's available out there.
Thanks. Those are the great comments. I tell you what I discovered when I started developing this presentation a year ago, when I first thought I was going to give it. I could spend 2 or 3 weeks on each one of the topics.
Mm-hmm.
Just so much out there. So I hope today at least we got an introduction of things you can do differently or add to what you're already doing to make your structures look more realistic. I think it'd be fun in the future to drill down to each one of these topic areas and
Mr. Lysing, put that on your notes.
Yeah, but get somebody besides me to do them. This guy here, John Lawrence, that's where we ought to start. And okay.
Mr. Corley likes to make sure that I know how beholding I am to him, because anytime doesn't go his way, he's telling me that the website's about to go down. He can feel that server about to fail. So I just want to make sure.
that and the emailer list, I can put people from Division 4 on there and really fix them.
I don't know. I don't know where that last one came from, because I looked all over the LSR and that guy wasn't listed in our database. I don't know where it came from. So anyway,
Sunspots. Gotta be sunspots.
Sunspots again. Yeah. Solar flares. All right.
Chinese hackers.
Everybody. I'm sorry, Dwayne.
Chinese hackers.
There you go. Everybody give Mr. Corley a round of applause.
Oh, you bet.
That
Good
was
job, Mike.
fantastic clinic. Thank you so very much. Guys, anybody have anything before I die? Anybody have anything that they want to add for today's meeting? Before we adjourn, I thought it turned out, it started off kind of rough, but it ended up turning out okay. Anybody have anything they want to add?
Yeah, Mike, this is Daryl.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Hey,
sir.
I was at the club the other day, and I'm not sure where it came from, but I got the newsletter similar to our marker lamp from the Southeast region, and was thumbing through it. It had an excellent article in it. Mike's clinic reminded me of it, and it had it about washes. Now, they were showing washes on vehicles, and he had gotten a lot of his information about from military modelers, how they do washes and how they make rust, things of that nature show up. It is an excellent article. I have contacted them about distributing it to our division in our region, and I got an approval to do that. So I'm going to send that out, a link to that page out on email. Down about page 14, 15, something like that is the page or the article entitled Washes. And
Okay.
It's a really excellent article, and I'll send that out to the news later this morning.
Thanks, Daryl. Their newsletter is called The Southerner, and if you sometimes I get information out of it via Pat McCarthy over in Jackson, but that's good. That's good information to have, Daryl. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. All right, guys. Well, everybody stay safe. I'm going to try to get rid of this this cough before the next month. I promise. I've had it about 3 weeks ever since that front rolled in, and it's about to kill me. I'm ready to be beyond it. But you guys have a safe weekend. We'll look forward to seeing you again. Go to Perfect Potluck. Sign up for what dish you plan to bring. If I don't see anybody signing up, then and by the way, Tom, I see you give a thumbs up over there. By all means, if there's Division III people that want to come and gather with us, you're certainly welcome. And the invitation is open. So just sign up there on Perfect Potluck. We can see how many people are really interested. And from there, we'll know whether we're going to continue with the party or not. But if we don't get some participation, then obviously I misread the circumstances and we will have to cancel. So you guys have a great weekend. Look forward to hearing back from you, getting your feedback. And you guys take care and be safe, everyone. Bye-bye.